The ECW World Heavyweight Championship was obviously the biggest prize in all of ECW, with some of the most hardcore and talented wrestlers holding onto it. But as most of us know, it lost most of its meaning when WWE took on ECW as a third brand and made it a complete joke. So today, we're going through the entire history of the ECW World Heavyweight Championship, and it all started on April 25th, 1992. When ECW was still Eastern Championship Wrestling and still part of the NWA. And it was Superfly Jimmy Snuka who defeated Salvatore Bellomo in the tournament final to become the first ever NWA ECW World Heavyweight Champion. However, he'd only hold it for a day and then dropped it to Johnny Hotbody the night after winning it. Johnny would hold on to the title for 79 days and then he'd lose it back to Superfly, who became a two-time champ. He defended the title for the first time against Sandman, then retained against Super Destroyer number 1 and King Kalua. He'd almost matched the 79-day reign of Johnny, but he fell short by a day and lost the belt to Don Morocco after holding the title for 78 days. Morocco defended successfully against Nikolai Volkov and Jimmy Snuka in a rematch, but eventually he dropped the belt to Sandman in November of 1992. After only holding onto the belt for 47 days. Sandman went into 1993 as champ. He successfully defended against Rockin' Rebel a few times, Kodiak Bear, and Salvatore Bellomo. However, when he found himself up against Don Morocco again, he lost the belt back to him after holding onto it for 138 days. Morocco would do a lot better than his previous title reign, retaining against Tommy Cairo, the Metal Maniac, and Sandman in a rematch. While still champ, he'd even wrestled for WCW at Slamboree 1993. However, it all went downhill when he got back to ECW, and he lost the title to Tito Santana after holding for 127 days. So Tito Santana was our new champ, but he'd only hold on to the belt for 32 days, leaving ECW and forfeiting the belt. So Shane Douglas ended up as champ somehow, and he retained the title against Sandman at the ECW Ultra Clash event. However, after retaining against JT Smith at NWA Blood Feast, he faced Sabu later on in the night, and he'd lose the title after only holding it for 23 days. Sabu had gone and won the NWA ECW World Championship in his second match with the promotion, and he'd go on to defend it successfully against Taz, and then even became a double champ when he picked up the ECW TV title in a win over Terry Funk. The rivalry with Funk continued, and at Holiday Hell, Sabu dropped the ECW World title to him after 85 days of holding. Terry Funk kicked off his ECW championship run by retaining against Pat Tanaka, and went into 1994 as champion, retaining against Shane Douglas and Sabu in a time limit draw at the night the line was crossed, and then in a taped fist match against Douglas, where Funk KO'd him to get the win. However, at the 1994 Ultimate Jeopardy event, he defended the title in an Ultimate Jeopardy steel cage match, which was just basically War Games. Terry Funk teamed up with Road Warrior Hawk, Kevin Sullivan, and Taz to face Shane Douglas, Mr. Hughes, and both members of Public Enemy, and it was Douglas who managed to pin Funk, grabbing the victory and the title, ending Funk's first reign at 90 days. So Shane Douglas was now a two-time champ, and he'd go on to have the longest run with the title so far, defeating the likes of former champion Terry Funk, Tommy Dreamer, and Jimmy Snuka. Then a tournament was held for the NWA World Championship, and after Douglas defeated 2 Cold Scorpio in the final, he vacated the NWA Championship and declared himself the ECW World Heavyweight Champion, marking the end of the NWA ECW Championship and resulting in the ECW having their own World Championship and finally becoming their own promotion, which would now be known as Extreme Championship Wrestling. He defended successfully throughout the rest of 1994, retaining in matches against Ron Simmons at November to Remember, and into 1995, defeating Tully Blanchard at Double Tables, Marty Jannetty at Return of the Funker, and Sandman at Freeway Dance. However, he'd faced Sandman again at Hostile City Showdown, and this time, Sandman grabbed the victory and the belt, ending Douglas's second reign of 385 days. However, it's only recognised as 230 days, since WWE counts this as the start of the ECW Championship. Anyway, Sandman kicked off his second reign with the title by retaining in a Falls Count Anywhere match against Cactus Jack, then in a rematch with Shane Douglas as the special guest ref, and then he retained against both of them in singles matches at the Enter Sandman event. His feud with Cactus Jack continued throughout 1995, and he even got the win over Jack in a barbed wire death match at the Barbed Wire Hoodies and Chokeslams event. However, as he got to the end of October as champ, he'd have to face Mikey Whipwreck in a ladder match and put his title on the line, and it was Mikey Whipwreck who grabbed the win and the belt, becoming a Triple Crown champ, the youngest world champion in pro wrestling history, and ending Sandman's second reign at 195 days. Mikey's first ECW World Championship reign didn't last very long, although he did successfully defend in a match against Steve Austin at November to Remember. But when it got to December to Dismember, he had to face Austin and Sandman in a three-way dance. Unfortunately, Mikey was eliminated by Austin, and Sandman pinned Austin to become a three-time ECW World Champ, ending Mikey Whipwreck's short reign at 41 days. So this was Sandman's third ECW World title reign, and he defended successfully against Cactus Jack, then Raven at Holiday Hell, and Conan at House Party. However, Sandman continued the feud with Raven and dropped the belt to him, ending his reign at 48 days. Raven went into 1996 as champion, and he kicked off his first ECW World title reign by retaining in a rematch against Sandman in a barbed wire match at CyberSlam. Then he retained against Shane Douglas at ECW Just Another Night, and then both of them at the Big Ass Extreme Bash. He'd get even more notable wins in defenses against Tommy Dreamer, Mikey Whipwreck, and Chris Jericho. He went into 1997 as champ, but eventually, after holding the belt for 126 days, he'd lose the title to Terry Funk at ECW's first pay-per-view, Barely Legal. Funk's second reign as ECW World Champ started with a successful defense against Stevie Richards, and then he'd go through Devon Dudley, Raven, and Devon, Raven and Sandman in a Four Corners match. He'd faced them all again at the Buffalo Invasion in a four-way elimination match, and got the win again. He retained in a match against Stevie Richards again at Memorial Mayhem, against Chris Candido at WrestlePalooza, and also retained against Shane Douglas at Hardcore Heatwave. However, Funk's second reign with the title was put to an end by Sabu, at Born to be Wired, in a brutal barbed wire match, ending Funk's second reign at 118 days. This Sabu reign didn't last very long though. He had to defend it in a three-way elimination match against Shane Douglas and Terry Funk at Hardcore Heaven, and Shane Douglas managed to get the win, ending Sabu's second reign at 8 days. And this would be Shane Douglas's third reign. He retained in matches against Balls Mahoney, Axel Rotten, John Cronus, Tommy Dreamer, Mikey Whipwreck, Dory Funk Jr., and finally the previous champ Sabu at ECW The Homecoming. Things were looking good, but Douglas's third reign was brought to an end by Bam Bam Bigelow at 59 days, meaning that we finally had a brand new first-time champ again. He retained in defenses against Mikey Whipwreck, Ricky Morton, Al Snow, Spike Dudley, Chris Candido, and then Shane Douglas at Ultimate Jeopardy. However, in November to Remember, Shane Douglas got his revenge and he beat Bigelow, ending his reign of 45 days, and kicking off the fourth reign of Douglas. He got injured during the match with Bigelow though, and was out for nearly 2 months. When he did come back, he retained against Chris Shetty, Jerry Lynn, Lance Storm, Too Cold Scorpio, and even managed to hold it all the way up until the next year, but at Guilty as Charged 1999, he'd finally lose the belt to Taz after holding for 406 days. This was Taz's first run as ECW World Heavyweight Champ, but it was an insane run. He retained in a match against Douglas at House Party, defended the world title and won the FTW title from Sabu at Living Dangerously. Then he'd retain in a Falls Count Anywhere match against Chris Candido at CyberSlam, and then in another Falls Count Anywhere match against Bubba Ray Dudley, and against Candido again at Hardcore Heaven. Eventually, after holding the title for 251 days, Taz's reign was ended by Mike Awesome at Anarchy Rules. And again, we had another first-time champion, and he kicked off his reign by retaining in matches against Rhino, Kid Cash, Tajiri, and New Jack. It looked like he was going to go into the year 2000 as champion. However, he got into a rivalry with Masato Tanaka after Awesome beat him in a match at November to Remember. And when they faced each other in a rematch, Tanaka got the win, ending Awesome's reign at 89 days. Luckily, Awesome got to face him again, and he ended Tanaka's short reign at 5 days, making Awesome a two-time champion, and it turned out that he'd be the one going into the year 2000 as champ. He retained against Spike Dudley at Guilty as Charged, and Tanaka again sometime after that, and he even managed to grab hold of the ECW World Tag titles when Awesome and Raven beat Tanaka and Tommy Dreamer. However, they lost the tag titles to the Impact players Living Dangerously in a three-way elimination match. But that same night, Awesome retained his World Heavyweight title against Kid Cash, and he carried the belt up until a month later. Eventually, Taz put an end to Awesome's title reign after 111 days, and this would be Taz's second ECW World Heavyweight title. It wasn't as good as his first reign though. He didn't defend the belt, and he left for WWE. However, he took the belt with him, and eventually returned to ECW at CyberSlam 2000 to face Tommy Dreamer, and Dreamer got the job done, ended Taz's second reign at 9 days, making this Tommy Dreamer's first ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Unfortunately for Dreamer, it was the shortest one yet, as he didn't even make it a day with the belt. That same night he won the title at CyberSlam, he dropped it to Just Incredible right away. So we had another brand new first-time champ with Just Incredible, and he retained the belt in matches against Mikey Whipwreck, Raven, and even his former tag partner Lance Storm at Hardcore Heaven. He'd defend successfully in a match with Dreamer at Heatwave, but when it got to Anarchy Rules, he'd face Jerry Lynn, and this time, he lost the match and the belt, ended his reign at 161 days. Jerry Lynn kicked off his first ECW World Heavyweight title reign by successfully defending in a three-way dance against C.W. Anderson and Steve Corino, and retaining again in a match with Danny Daniels. However, in November to Remember, he was overpowered in a double jeopardy match against Sandman, Steve Corino, and Just Incredible. And it was Steve Corino who got the job done, ending Lynn's reign at 34 days, and kicking off Corino's first title reign. He scraped a win over Lynn in a no contest, if you can call that a win, for his first defense. Then he retained against Sandman, and when he met Jerry Lynn and Just Incredible in a three-way dance at Massacre on 34th Street. He also retained in another three-way dance at Holiday Hell, making it into 2001 as champion. However, at the first pay-per-view of the year, Guilty as Charged, Sandman managed to get the win in a tables, ladders and chairs and canes three-way match, ending Corino's reign at 62 days. So this was Sandman's fifth ECW World title, but it was his worst reign yet. He had to face Rhino right away after winning the belt, and he got put through a table, leading to Rhino becoming the new ECW champion, and became a double champ, as he also held the TV title. He retained in a match against Sandman the week later, and in a match against Spike Dudley the day after that. However, this is where ECW closed its doors, and the title was deactivated, with Rhino's reign ending at 92 days. That was until WWE bought ECW. Then in 2006, we'd finally get another ECW World Heavyweight Champion after 5 years of the title being deactivated. Rob Van Dam would be the man to get the title after winning the WWE Championship against John Cena at One Night Stand. And as ECW became a third brand of WWE, he was awarded the new ECW World Championship. He went on to defend both titles, but when it came to a triple threat match against John Cena and Edge, he came up short and lost his WWE Championship to Edge. And it even got worse for RVD, as he lost his ECW Championship to Big Show, ending his reign at 20 days. Big Show retained in Extreme Rules matches against Ric Flair, Kane, and then Sabu at SummerSlam, and he carried it all the way up until December. But at the December to Dismember pay-per-view, he'd faced Bobby Lashley, CM Punk, Test, Hardcore Holly, and RVD in an Extreme Elimination Chamber, and it was Lashley that came out on top, ending Big Show's reign at 151 days. Lashley retained in a rematch against Big Show the night later, and then managed to keep the title in a no contest against RVD. He also retained against Test at the 2007 Royal Rumble, and Mr. Kennedy at No Way Out, but that win came by countout. He ended up defending all the way up until Backlash, but that was where his reign would come to an end at 146 days, by the hands of Vince McMahon of all people. Well, with a bit of help from Umaga and Shane O'Mac as well. So yeah, Vince was the new ECW World Champion, and actually managed to retain it, of course with the help of Shane and Umaga again. They took out RVD in a match, and then they lost to Lashley in another handicap match. But since Lashley pinned Shane, and not Vince himself, he decided it didn't count, and he would remain champ. However, Vince had to face Lashley again at One Night Stand, but this time with no Umaga to back him up. Obviously, they didn't care about the rules, and Umaga and Shane did help anyway, but Lashley managed to get the win this time, ending Vince's reign at 34 days, and becoming a two-time champ in the process. Unfortunately for Lashley, he had to relinquish his title after he was drafted to Raw, and his reign was ended at only 7 days. However, the ECW World Championship wasn't gone for long. A tournament was put together to crown the new champ, and CM Punk and Johnny Nitro ended up in the finals, and Johnny Nitro came out victorious, kicking off his first ECW World title reign. He changed his name to John Morrison, defended in a rematch against CM Punk at the Great American Bash, and again at SummerSlam. But the week later on ECW, he'd lose the belt in another rematch to Punk, ending his reign at 67 days. This was Punk's first and only ECW World title reign, but it was a good one. He retained in matches against Elijah Burke at Unforgiven, Big Daddy V but by DQ at No Mercy, The Miz at Cyber Sunday, John Morrison and The Miz in the Triple Threat match at Survivor Series, and he even went into 2008 as champ. But eventually, he found himself in a match against Chavo Guerrero, and this is where Punk's ECW title reign came to an end at 142 days. Chavo kicked off his reign by retaining in a rematch against Punk at No Way Out, again on ECW, and in a 2 out of 3 falls match on a house show. However, when it came to defending his title on the grandest stage of them all, Chavo lost the belt to Kane at WrestleMania 24, ending his reign at 67 days. Kane beat Chavo in a rematch at Backlash to retain his title, and then mostly defended on house shows up until Night of Champions, where he found himself up against Mark Henry and The Big Show in a triple threat match. And this is where Mark Henry ended the reign of Kane after 91 days as champ. Mark Henry defended a bunch of times on house shows and beat Matt Hardy by DQ at SummerSlam, but when it came to Unforgiven, he had to defend his belt in a championship scramble against Matt Hardy, Chavo Guerrero, Finlay, and The Miz, and this time Matt Hardy got the win, ending Mark Henry's reign at 69 days. He'd have to face Mark Henry again in a rematch at No Mercy, and then he retained in matches against Evan Bourne at Cyber Sunday, against Finlay on ECW, and went into 2009 as champion. However, he'd face a new opponent in Jack Swagger for his first defense of the year, and this time, he was unsuccessful, with Swagger ending Hardy's reign at 127 days. Swagger retained the title in a rematch against Hardy at the Royal Rumble, against Finlay at No Way Out, and against Christian on the WrestleMania Revenge Tour. But when he came up against Christian at Backlash, he couldn't get the job done, and Captain Charisma ended Jack Swagger's reign at 102 days. Christian would face Tommy Dreamer for his first defense, and he lost by DQ, meaning that he'd keep the title. And then he was up against Jack Swagger again at Judgment Day, and he actually won the match, defending his title successfully. But then at Extreme Rules, Christian had to defend his title in a triple threat match against both Dreamer and Swagger, and this time it was Tommy Dreamer, the ECW veteran, who got the win, ending Christian's ECW championship run at 41 days. Dreamer then had to defend the belt in the championship scramble at the Bash against Christian, Finlay, Swagger, and Mark Henry. And against all odds, he actually managed to retain. Unfortunately, at the next pay-per-view Night of Champions, he was up against Christian again, and Christian ended his reign at 48 days. So Christian's first run with the title may have been quite short, but he made sure this one was going to be a long one. He retained in Extreme Rules matches against Tommy Dreamer, against William Regal at SummerSlam, and again at Breaking Point. Then he'd defend successfully in a dark match against Paul Burchill at Bragging Rights, in a ladder match against Shelton Benjamin at TLC, and he made it through to 2010 as champion, retaining at the Royal Rumble against Ezekiel Jackson. However, Christian had to face Jackson again, but this time in an Extreme Rules match on the final ECW show. And this time Ezekiel Jackson got the W, ending Christian's second ECW championship reign at an impressive 204 days. The championship and the brand was disbanded on this night, making Ezekiel Jackson the final ECW World Champion, and also the man with the shortest reign at 2 minutes and 25 seconds. So there you have it, the entire history of the ECW World Championship. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Click here for the entire history of the WWE Cruiserweight Championship. And if you want to become one of the Dawgs yourself, check the links in the description, grab yourself a nice piece of merch, and we'll see you in the next one.